public meeting, first public cooperative meeting.
Okay, go ahead, Mayor.
So we're ready. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see you here. I was hoping I'd see a lot more people, but we're going to have some important folks here, so I'm going to get out of the way. I just want to do a quick introduction. We have the U.S. Forest Service that's going to be represented here today. The Village of Ruidoso, so of course, our folks. Dick Cook is over here. Lincoln County's here. I don't see if you're Lincoln County, raise your hand. I don't see you. There you are. Okay, thank you, guys. Forestry Division of New Mexico Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resource Department. Smokovich, that's Mr. Nick over here. South Central Mountain Resource Conservation and Development Council. Laura?
She couldn't be here.
She couldn't be here?
Running the show.
Okay, she's running. So anyway, Laura's usually here. And sitting here, okay. Upper Hondo Soil and Water Conservation District. All right, thank you, ladies. Natural Resources Conservation Service, those folks probably should have a house here by now. As much time as you've spent here. So thank you all for being here. Now we're going to turn it over. We got some FEMA representatives in here. Eddie, you want to get up and say something? Is that right?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Eddie. This is my partner, Jason. We're with FEMA. We weren't scheduled to be here. We actually came because we want to listen to some of the resources that are available so we can share that information. But as far as FEMA, we are here. We're over at the community center for the next 4 days. And what we specifically do is we try to get people registered. We understand that a lot of people are registering for help with, they thought they're registering with FEMA, but they're registering with the Red Cross, and they're not actually registered with us. So one of the things we like to do is share the information. Yesterday, we sat with a group and they didn't know that there was funeral assistance available, and they had somebody that died in their family. Rental assistance and car assistance and housing. There's just a ton of assistance, and unless they come and register, they don't even get to know about it. So for the most part, we can register people on site. If anyone was here, we have some flyers. You can take pictures, and we hope we can share them so that they can go online. They can download an app. They can meet us in person. And our particular cadre is mobile. So if there's somebody that can't come out of their house and doesn't have access to a computer, we'll go to them. So the main thing is the more you can share that flyer, it gets out there, the more people we can help. But we'll be at the community center for the next 4 days over there. And we're
8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Yeah, 8 to 5. And we're going to be somewhere else probably after that, but they tell us day to day. So not even sure if we'll be here for 4 days, but if we can share that, it'd be great. Appreciate your time, guys.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So my name is Eric Boyer with the Village of Ruidoso. I'm the Water Resource Director. So today we've got 3 speakers. We're here to talk about the post-fire recovery. So we're looking at erosion control and other natural resource management. If you guys are looking for other support related to the disaster tied to your home or relocation or any of that, talk to the FEMA guys in the back. We also have a sheet in the back that has some contact information that we can help you with. And if you guys have any questions for us after the fact, there's lots of village staff around here that can help direct you to the appropriate person for your need. Our first speaker today, though, is Nick Smokovich with the Forestry Division for the state.
Well, again, welcome everybody. Basically, I wanted to kind of give an introduction about what we may or may not expect from the fire and the flood effects. If you could go ahead and open that website up again. So the After the Wildfire Guide was put together after a series of devastating fires and floods in New Mexico. We got a grant from the Seabees, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. There's a lot of folks that put a lot of time and effort into building up this particular document. And I just wanted to introduce you to it. It's a public facing website, After the Wildfire Guide for New Mexico communities. And basically the first thing I wanted to kind of check on was this along the top row, the farthest one, the flood information. What we're trying to do is just get people prepared for the idea that this fire happened pretty early in the season. So we do have a little bit of time, a short window to do some mitigation work to help lessen the flood damage. I'm not going to stand up here and say that we can actually stop flooding in Gavilan Canyon. you know, with New Mexico weather, all it takes is the right storm cell sitting in the right spot, and burn scar or no, there can be flooding. And we saw that this past summer. There was a lot of flooding and there was no burn scar it was coming off of. So we know there'll be ash flows. There's always ash flows after a storm. What we're most concerned about, and what the modeling that was done, is about debris flow. And the difference being is ash flow is just, you know, really dirty water leaving nasty residue behind after the water recedes. Debris flows are trees, rocks, boulders, and whatever else gets dislodged and comes downstream that can cause a lot of damage. And so that's what we're trying to prepare people for. And folks from FEMA can tell you, now's the time, if you think you're in a flood zone, now's a time to look at getting flood insurance. So ahead of time, so that you're prepared for that. So it talks about a little bit about the flooding and what might be expected off of this link. They told me to kind of introduce people to the idea. So if you could go on to the one link there at the bottom, it's on the left-hand side, and it says flood videos. Last one, there you go. So that first one on top is the Dixon Apple Orchard after the Coachee fire. 2011, August. I don't know about the sound there. So as you can see, I mean, just a dark black ash flow. Now remember, Coachee is a much larger watershed, and so you know there's no telling the amount. You know, just the right amount of water in the short duration of time in the wrong spot can cause a lot of damage. But the idea was to prepare people, get that kind of that mental image of what may or may not happen. I mean, there's no guarantees. Once again, it's all dependent on weather and timing and the duration. So that was a video of that. And then okay, that's fine. So I'm not trying to just sit here and talk doom and gloom, but it need to have the reality in mind, what could happen. The other item that they wanted me to talk about, and I already mentioned about the insurance, because that's a big part of this section, was to go in and look at the different post-fire treatments at the top.
Where's that at?
With the little shovel and the rake. So like I said, we have time right now. And one of the presenters that will be here for this document is the NRCS, and they'll be signing up folks. But in the meantime, if people wanted to do any actions on their own and can afford that, take some mitigation steps. I mean, there's already been a lot of volunteer service out in the community, removing dead standing trees that could come down. That's a really great idea. Anything that could clog a culvert or divert the water flow is going to be pretty important to get out of the way, because we don't want to see that stuff jam up and become a temporary dam that can break loose and cause even more damage. So looking at the various types of, we want to look at the post-fire treatments PDF on the left-hand side. Bottom of the road.
Down at the bottom?
Right, yeah, on the left side there. So some of these various treatments, didn't open it up.
Mhm. There are currently no items in this folder.
Well, that's no good. When I was there just looking the other day, it was there. So go to the index of treatments. it up one more. There you go. Okay, that's better. So we have the Hillside Treatments, the dry mulch, which is pretty much a looking at chipping or any kind of erosion control, trying to reduce the impact of raindrops on the exposed soil and dislodging that so that it will come downhill. And if you click on that, I think it'll actually show a photograph of it,
Of what,
the dry mulch.
oh,
Well, either way, so you're already open to that one. So the wet mulch, hydro mulch system, those are gonna really dependent on, I could see like an individual person probably is not going to do that. It's gonna have to be through a group effort. And we'd have to identify which slopes have the best opportunity for something like that. I think the dry mulch method with straw, wattles, wood chip fibers, saltwater, was looking at the idea of in the past during other fires, they've had the wood chip wattles, basically like a sausage tube casing full of wood chips that can be staked mid-slope on the hillside to help reduce overland flow and try to capture some of that soil runoff so that something can start growing again on the uphill side of those wattles. So it talks about the purpose of each one of these items, the effectiveness. With anything that deals with water and trying to slow it down, duplication is the key. Putting one log across the slope is not going to catch much. It'll fill up very quickly and overflow and have problems. So it's working with your neighbors to go, anyone who's upstream from you, and then on your side of you, just kind of duplicate that stuff because they're going to fail. Let's be honest. I mean, when once water starts moving, it has a lot of energy behind it. So what all these different methods are trying to do is disperse the water's energy and try to allow it to slowly percolate into the ground a little bit. But I mean, with that much material moving and things like that, the problem is trying to catch it up high where before it starts to build up a head of steam. So there's the dry mulching methods. And then if you go back a backspace, I would think the next one would be like, well, there's seeding. Slash spreading is just basically taking branches that still have needles on them, spreading that up, basically in places where it won't move. That's the real key is you don't want to put anything down that's going to wash. You want to have it anchored in place with either netting or some kind of, or on relatively flat ground will help keep the real erosion down. And once again, building up so it doesn't drain into smaller first order channels and build up that steam where it's going to cause damage downstream. So anything where you can cover the ground, give it a chance to dissipate some of its energy and intercept the raindrops coming down from loosening the soil is going to be helpful. And I don't want to get too deep into this, Kenny, because I know you're going to be covering some of this, but I just wanted to talk about a few of the methods and show people where they can find that kind of information to get a little better idea of the description of, we might hear about some of these different treatments that are being suggested. And this is on this website is where you can find actual descriptions and some pictures. Maybe click on that log erosion barrier. That's a real common one, especially when you're already dealing with dead trees on your property. We don't necessarily need a pile of fuel for later down the road on private property, but a few well-placed logs that are either anchored with the stumps and then like rebar or some other way of anchoring the other side of the log in and contouring it along the hillside so it can catch that soil that's running off and prevent it from, again, picking up a head of steam will help out immensely. So I don't want to take up too much time, but like I said, there's a whole list of different types of treatments that are available on the website. We can go over particular ones there at the end or in the Q&A, bring that back up, but I'll go ahead and turn it back to Eric and I'll be here the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Nick. So there are quite a bit of people on our Zoom channel. If you guys have any questions, just type them in and we'll get them in the Q&A session. But at this time, I'd like to introduce Jen Hickman with the Bear Team. She is the trainee Bear Team lead for this fire event. If she's ready.
Yeah, I just need to transfer my USB to you. Can I do that?
Let's see.
How do you want to do this?
Well, while they're doing that, was there any questions? Since there was a little downtime.
Does Energy Minerals have any seeds, seedlings, or wattles available to private property owners to do this stuff? Or
So the grass seed and the wattles will be through the Upper Hondo Soil and Water Conservation District. And then New Mexico State Forestry, we always sell tree seedlings and shrub seedlings. But I would suggest just try the soil stabilization first. The tree seedlings aren't going to necessarily stabilize the soil this first rain. So you can get them in the ground this winter after whatever happens to try to, anchor the soil, but just small seedlings aren't going to do the job right away. But those are always available through state forestry and their mail order. So there's a lot of different native varieties that could be planted, and we can help with designing planting that would help be appropriate for your property.
and then grass seed.
Like I said, native grass seed is with the Upper Hondo Soil and Water District. Did you want to, we didn't have you set up as a presentation. I hate to throw you on the spot, but yeah, Upper Hondo Soil and Water Conservation District, so for wattles and grass seed. Did you get in there, Jen? Oh, yeah. Any other questions? Like I said, the main thing, the takeaway, I think, from, after reading, this is my first rodeo when it comes to post-fire flooding. I've unfortunately seen it in some other areas, but I haven't had the unfortunate need to go through this step with y'all. But we're going to try to work through it together. But the main takeaway is the flood insurance ahead of time and sign up with the NRCS. They're going to be talking about their EWP program. So we'll get in more into that later.
Okay.
Look out for that cord.
Sorry.
Too tall. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer Hickman. I'm actually my daytime job is the forest soil scientist here on the Lincoln National Forest. But in terms of the post-fire assessment, I was one of the Bear Lead trainees for the assignment. And so just to introduce a few folks here, Andy Casillas was actually our Bear Team leader. He is our regional soil scientist out of the Albuquerque location. And then, of course, Rhonda Stewart, who is our Bear coordinator on the forest here. So a term that I'm going to be using a lot is called BEAR. And basically what that stands for is basically everything that we deal with after post-fire, after the suppression has happened. We're now dealing with the BEAR, which stands for Burned Area Emergency Response. And so we could go ahead and go next. And I would like to also just take a little bit of time to kind of describe basically the team that came together to help us assess the McBride fire. We actually had both the McBride and the Nogal, but because I'm here today to speak about McBride, we'll focus on that. So not only did we have some of our local folks from the forest here, we had other people from the region come help us. So other people from different forests that came to help. We had Kelly was our hydrology lead for the hydrologist, and we had Kevin Carnes from the regional office, and Kyle and Eric Robertson and Jaylene came from other forests outside of the Lincoln. And then we had our local hydrologist, Pete Harridan, who was all a part of the hydrology team. And then we had a soils group, which actually, I'm sorry, let me step back here. I had Eric Robertson, who was the soils lead, and Jaylene, who also helped him with soils, and both of them are off of our forest. And so they were able to come and assist us. And then, of course, we had some of our local folks who came to help with their special areas. So we had David Baker, who took care of our invasive weeds. We had Larry Cordova and Taylor from the local Smoky Bear Ranger District. I'm sure many of you are aware of who Larry is, but Larry presented the critical values for wildlife. And then, of course, you know, we had our archaeologist, Scott, who covers the Smoky Bear Ranger District. And then our local forest engineer, Andres Bolaños, who helped us from engineering. And then Taji, who also helped us with some of our GIS. And then, you know, at the same time, we always need those people who are helping us with the public information. Our PIOs, they're the ones that really get the information out there. So we had our local Laura Rabone, and then of course Kathleen and Jessica also helped in the PIO shop, and then of course myself and Andy. And the reason why I went through that is because I just wanted to give you guys an understanding of really what is comprised of a bear team and what different resources come together to help you know, analyze all those post-fire effects. So thank you for allowing me to just share that with you. But we could go ahead and move on. So the McBride fire started on April the 12th. And once we had a chance to mobilize the bear team, we were able to begin looking at some of the post-fire effects. So we actually started out with a bark map, and basically what it was is just, it gives us a general idea. It's a satellite image, and it helps expose what we have in terms of low, moderate, high, and unburned areas. And so once we received that, we were able to kind of gain an understanding of some of those post-fire impacts that we were seeing out there. So this is just kind of an overview of the McBride fire. Of course, like many of you know, largely that fire was on us, on the U.S. Forest Service. So we had about 1,325 acres that was on the Lincoln National Forest. And then, 4,551 acres on us, and then 1,325 acres on private, and then another 370 acres on private land, totaling 6,246 acres burned.
That difference with the private, one of it's in the village of Ruidoso, and the rest is in the county.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Which is which?
The smaller is the village, where it started.
So basically the assessment ran from April 26th to May 5th. And of course, I already talked about the different resources that were available for the bear. So again, like I talked about, we originally started with the bark map, and that image was obtained on April the 19th.
Sorry.
That's fine. And so after we received that image, we had a chance to pull the bear team together. We had a chance to pull the bear team together. So we're here for the soil burn severity. That's okay. So let's move on. So we got the bark image, and we were able to begin to have some of our folks start to do some of that ground truthing. So we had our soil scientists get out there, and they basically did a lot of that ground truthing using that bark map. They navigated to sites that were anywhere from, the moderate to high areas. They did their field work over 2 days. So they were out there April 26th and 27th. We use a field guide in the Forest Service, which is basically helps us to look at, from a soil standpoint, we take a look at different characteristics with that soil. So we look at like ash characteristics, the ground cover, roots, soil structure. We look at the vegetation as far as like ground cover, the overstory, and taking a look at the impacts from the fire. So basically they got out there and they did some ground truthing, conducted some surveys, and were able to get a good representation of what that fire looked like from the ground. So basically using some of their ground reconnaissance, using that FARC satellite imagery, we were able to begin to start to formulate that soil burn severity map. And so, which basically is what you're looking at here on the right side of the screen. When they actually got out there was pockets of high burn severity, but after doing a lot of the recon, they discovered that there was a need to kind of increase that high burn severity. Now, we didn't increase that by a lot, but basically it was just using their ground reconnaissance to help verify that and to help validate that soil burn severity. So then at that point, we felt comfortable that we were able to go ahead and finalize our soil burn severity. So basically what that resulted in is this table that's down here on the very right bottom. It shows the extent of each of those soil burn severity classes based on the different type of soils that are out there within that entire fire perimeter. So basically, this is total fire-wise. It doesn't matter what the jurisdiction is. This is just the entire McBride fire. So in the unburned area, we had 963 acres, which was unburned. And the low, we had 3,914. The moderate, 1,343. And of course, in the high area, after we had a chance to validate that and increase that, we ended up with 22 acres. And basically the third column is, what is that extent, right? So there's that particular area is comprised of different soil types. And so it's taking a look.
Can I ask
How's
you a
that?
question?
Just,
Yeah, you guys are muted. Check,
Okay, check
this
now.
online. Can somebody put something in the chat?
it's okay.
Nobody heard your presentation.
I know,
They
sorry.
heard. Yeah, they heard.
So that Bear team made the assessment on the whole fire.
Correct.
Their assessment's done. Then they come out with recommendations. Those recommendations will be listed for private property owners and county other agencies that the Bear team sees. Because where I'm at, the chutes and drainages are so steep.
Yeah.
And the sticks that are 100 years old that burned up, the blood killed half the stuff is no good anyway. But once that's all exposed in those drainages, will that Bear team have those assessments available to private people to assess what needs their recommendation for that property?
So we-
Not on private property or
So
just
we
on the
can't make
forest?
recommendations for private landowners.
So
We
you're
can
just dealing with
only,
the forest right now?
And the
We can-
soils.
Well, the soils and the trees and whatever, all those people are listed there. The PIOs have more on that team than anybody. They're trying to find out what's the recommendation for that hottest part of Avalon. It's gonna come off the forest, it's gonna come off the private. And it's probably the hottest part of that whole gathering there at Homestead, if you ask me. The 3.5 acres is meaty, but I'm wondering if anybody's gonna make any recommendations on how to do the steep stuff.
Are we gonna have any recommendations on private property? That's what the question is.
So,
Or if the bear team makes recommendations for the whole fire, it's what, private and forest or just forest?
so once we get done with this bear team assessment discussion, Kenneth Branch with the NRCS is gonna discuss about the emergency watershed protection program and how you can get individual assistance at your own property.
What's that called?
It's-
Emergency?
Watershed protection program. So we got another presenter that's gonna talk specifically about your question and how to help you.
Okay.
Sorry, Jen.
Okay, so did we get clarification that they can hear us online?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, so let's move forward. Okay, so basically what happened, the soil assessment was completed. We had a team of hydrologists come in. And they basically, it took them about 2.5 days to conduct field work. And of course, just like any assessment out there, there's modeling that's involved. So on the soils part, they use a model that we call erosion risk management tool, which is basically ERMIT. And that models like post-fire soil erosion. Well, just like the soils group, hydrology also has a couple of models that they use. And they use the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, their HMS, to model different components of the fire. And basically it's taking 4 points in these drainages that you were talking about, sir, and taking a look at the response of these areas as it relates to that fire. They also used Wildcat, another model, to model areas around Eagle Creek area. And basically that's like to look at flash flood risk calculations. And then just to give you an idea of the ground reconnaissance that they conducted, each of these red circles is where they basically did a lot of the ground truthing. So if you take a look at the yellow here, that's where the moderate is. And then the turquoise, it's kind of hard to see this, but the moderate is the yellow, the turquoise is the low, and of course the green is the unburned. And then there are small pockets here of high burn severity and that are coming up in red at the very top. So that just kind of gives you an idea of some of the ground truthing that they looked at across the entire fire and areas that they modeled to. And to give you a better idea of how some of that modeling gets looked at. So each of these particular areas, we call them watersheds. So they're basically like these little pockets, if you can see them here. These are areas that the hydrologists looked at to do some flash flooding risk. And here are the different sub watersheds that they modeled and put into the to help get the post-fire flooding, the flash flooding rather. And basically that was one of the models that they used. This basically helps to determine the initial, those first storms that come, right? That's basically how it relates to each of these watersheds. And there's this other component here where it looks at the risk of, what's going to happen when we have post-fire, or monsoon season. It's kind of hard to see here, but there's a category, there's 4 categories, and that basically relates to how each of those little pockets will respond to the watersheds. Like what is that? Is there going to be minimal effects? If there's going to be significant, very significant, and then extreme effects. So basically we're looking at the, second, third storms that are happening, and what that basically kind of gives us an idea of maybe areas of concern that we want to focus on. So, go ahead.
Are those maps available online?
Or
or you can
printed? I
put
don't
them up
even have
against another
internet
map
or
and see?
printed.
So I'll get there. Just give me a chance, okay? Just give me a chance. So basically here, it helps us to kind of line out these areas that we have. So there's 3 areas up on top. We talked, I think you mentioned home, or you did, sir. You mentioned Homestead Loop area, right? We've got an extreme area identified. We've got Blue Lake, Skunk Canyon. These are some areas of concern.
Those are on the forest.
Yes, they're all within that perimeter on us. Yes, that is correct.
Across the canyon, it's the same deal. Maps.
Correct. So they modeled basically the entire fire. So it's not just the Forest Service, even though when it comes to treatments, it's only on forest land. The Bear team basically looked at the entirety of the McBride fire. So they encompassed everything that was burned, if that makes sense.
It does.
Okay. All right. Okay. Basically, let's go ahead and go to the next one. Okay, so based on those models, I'm not sure if you all can see the red here. These 3 watersheds are the areas that we have concern in terms of potential flooding. Okay, so that was an area that our soils folks looked at, the hydrology folks modeled, and basically that helped us to kind of look at, okay, what areas are we going to have flooding come monsoonal season. And the next one will actually kind of bring it together. So USGS puts out this model that we use, and it basically is the debris flow. I talked about this particular one on the left-hand side. It demonstrates what's the likelihood of that area to flood, okay? So the left side talks about like likelihood in terms of potential flooding. And then this other one on the right side is looking at the amount of volume that potentially could happen. So if you can take a look at the 2 maps, this one basically almost encompasses the entire fire that we're gonna likely get volume material coming down. But in terms of the likelihood of these areas flooding, it's gonna be in this particular area, okay?
Is that one on the right expressed in like a percentage? Is that? I can't read it.
Oh, yeah, this is so hard to see these tables. I apologize about that. But they are available, so we could demonstrate and show you a little bit, you know, some of the areas that you might have a concern about. I know you mentioned that you live close to parts of,
I mean,
the
like on
forest.
debris flow there, from what I understood, they're calculating how much percentage more than normal it would be.
correct. So that's right. So basically what we're looking at is what happened pre-fire and now what's going to happen post-fire. Yes. So this is the likelihood that we're going to have flooding. And then this is in terms of volume, what we can expect across the entire fire. Okay. And then you could go to the next one. So given that, we basically have a combined hazard is what we call it. And that combined hazard is those 4 different categories that I talked about. And that basically kind of helps us combining all that information. It helps us target specific areas, okay? So all of this stuff is available for you. I just kind of wanted to give an overview of, you know, what the expectation can be in terms of post-fire flooding.
So does that indicate that like they're gonna triage it by that as far as a response or mitigation efforts or anything? Or?
Yes, so that kind of helps give us an informed, it helps to inform the Bear team of any kind of recommendations that we will have in terms of treatment. right? So maybe certain areas that we can look at in terms of the different channels that we might get a higher response out of. Okay, and then next slide.
Okay.
And then other areas that the forest looked at, or the bear team did, we looked at from an engineering standpoint, we looked at the Forest Road 120, 120A. We had our wildlife folks assess the impacts to the spotted owl. And then up on the very top area there, we had the Blue Lake Wetland Restoration Project. And that particular area burned over pretty hot. So we're still trying to determine how we're gonna respond to some of these post-fire effects. And then, of course, you know, the musk thistle is a very big concern for the forest. So we had our, we had the weeds assessment also looked at, and then our archaeology also did their assessment. So basically from that, each of the members were able to make recommendations based on the impacts from the fire to their particular resource. So I know there is a lot of information out there that folks are wanting to get information from. And so in CWeb, we have a McBride post-fire bear web information that we're updating, I would say daily, with all the information that was either presented today or, you know, some of the future information that is still coming. And then to add to that, on Wednesday, we have a cooperators meeting that we're going to be meeting with other agencies. So like Nick and the village and some of those other folks. And that meeting is scheduled, Eric has that actually scheduled for Wednesday the 11th. And so all this information that we have will be shared with our cooperators so that they'll have the same information that we've compiled in the assessment. So I know that was just a quick overview. There's so much more that goes into the bear assessment, but I just kind of wanted to give you a general overview of basically what is going into that assessment and how we're going to move forward. I know a big thing right now is everybody is interested in, okay, now that the assessment's done, what is going to happen now? Where are we going to go from here, right? That's the big thing everybody wants to know. And at this point, we have made our recommendations in terms of treatment, but because those treatments have not been approved by either the regional office or the Washington office, I cannot speak to those right now.
But they know where they're gonna start.
So we've made our recommendations as a bear team. And until those treatments have been approved, I cannot say exactly what those will be. But I will say that each of these resources were able to put forward their recommendations to help mitigate the impacts from the fire and how that impacts each of their resource areas. So hopefully that kind of gives you guys an overview of how the assessment is pulled together. I know there's a lot of scientific terms here. And the modeling is, you know, there's a lot of information, a lot of inputs that go to it, the outputs that come out of that. But basically, that's kind of how it leads us to our treatments and how we can justify those treatments. And so it's just a quick overview of some of the field reconnaissance that we do, the modeling, and then, of course, the collaboration that the team pulls together to make these recommendations for treatments. So does anybody else have any questions?
So the maps are available on this one?
Correct. Yes, sir. Yes.
Oh,
And
sorry.
yes, the if you just look at the McBride post-fire bear information, all of that is on NCWeb. So yes.
And all those maps.
Yes, the soil burn severity is there as well, absolutely. Mhm.
And Nogal.
Yes, absolutely, and Nogal as well. So there is the Nogal post-fire bear assessment that you can also find there.
I hate to ask this question because I think folks know the answer, but in all their studies and stuff, are they looking at weather forecasts for this year for the monsoon season? And if so, what are they seeing?
Correct. So we have been in communication with the weather folks, and we get updates from them daily. I'll give you an example. So last year we had the Three Rivers fire. We were notified from them, and they stayed in communication with the bear folks so that we could predict those monsoonal storms that were coming. And so that's another technique that we will be incorporating for this coming monsoon season as well. Yes, so we are fully engaged with those folks, and that information, I'm sure there's also a link on NC Web. I would encourage everybody to just take a few minutes to go look at that, because there's plenty of information there about the assessment, anything that's got to do with the weather, some of our other cooperators information. I know NRCS is going to get up here and speak, but I think we also have a link to their site as well.
Approximately, how long will the McBride Bear team be active, engaged on the ground right now?
Okay.
And how long approximately will all the mitigation take for the repair for McBride?
Okay, so the assessment was completed, what I just described, right? We finished that up last week. And so basically the actual team has been released, everybody's traveled home. But the team leads, myself, and the other two individuals are still involved. And we have constant communication. So even though the assessment phase is over, there still is the implementation stage. So there's two parts to this, the assessment and the implementation. And we stay engaged in that implementation phase all the way through the very end. And then of course we have to track if there's any treatments that have been approved, then we continue to track that progress through the entire year. So I guess to answer your question, the assessment team is basically come and gone. But the good thing is, because we're all still Forest Service, we're able to communicate, daily. If something comes up, we can reach out to the soil scientists or to the hydrologist or any of those folks that may not be on the forest. We still have that capability to communicate with them. So it's not like they're going to walk away and just kind of leave us here. We'll still be communicating with those folks.
And how long do you see the recovery effort?
Well, I would say that recovery is, it's dependent upon the treatment. There's many factors, right? It's dependent on the amount of moisture we get out there, recovery. I mean, there's so much more that goes into that recovery time. It just really depends, ma'am. Yeah, but the good thing is we also monitor that. There is a component that we wrote into the assessment. We've asked for monitoring. And so that's basically allows us to go out there and kind of track that progress, track the recovery, just like you're talking about. We have that opportunity to go out there. In fact, as an example, we have the Three Rivers fire that we've gone back, and this coming summer, we have people going back and tracking that monitoring. We had the Pine Lodge fire that happened 2 years ago, I believe now, 2-3 years ago. We still have monitoring plots out there. A lot of our seasonal people that have come on. I work here on the Lincoln National Forest, so I have seasonals that come work for me, and I basically have those folks go out and follow a protocol that we have for that monitoring. So this will just be kind of an ongoing, and it's basically to help us inform of the recovery that's happening out there.
So what would be the final monitoring plot of your end goal cycle for this
Well, we are gonna be monitoring for like over 5 years.
5 years?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep,
Good thing.
sure. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen. So I appreciate that, Jen, and sorry about the technical issue. Our next speaker, I think, is going to answer a lot of people's questions they have. It's Kenneth Branch with the NRCS, and he's going to talk about the Emergency Watershed Protection Program. Questions in the chat. We'll do them at the end.
Hi, thanks, Eric. Good afternoon. My name is Kenneth Branch. I work with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and some folks may not have heard of our agency. I think I heard one gentleman say, I've never heard of that outfit. So that's all right. That's okay.
NRCS.
Yeah, and that's who we are. We'll give you a little bit of education today on the program that we offer when it comes to post-fire rehab, basically. And so the program that we offer is called the Emergency Watershed Protection Program, EWP. Of course, we're the federal government, so we have to have an acronym. If we don't have an acronym, we're not the government. So basically, EWP helps landowners, private individuals implement recovery measures to relieve imminent hazards to life and property after a sudden impairment, basically after a natural disaster such as a fire. So this is where we've had a lot of conversations about federal land. Now we're moving down and we're going to start talking about private land. Okay, next slide. So throughout the slide, I'm going to give a lot of information on the program. I'll show some pictures of some work that we've implemented in the past. But the most important part right now of this program is that we must have a sponsor, okay? And a project sponsor is any legal subdivision of the state government or state agency. Without a sponsor, we cannot implement the program whatsoever. Right now, the village of Ruidoso and Lincoln County have both stepped to the plate, and they basically want to sponsor this, so that's good. That's the first step. So now we can get moving with the rest of the program. Some of the assistance includes practices associated with removing threats to public health and safety. That's, of course, one of the biggest instances or the biggest caveats of the program. And then we want to restore the natural environment to the greatest extent practical after the natural disaster. So we won't come in and necessarily improve it, but we want to restore it back to its pre-disaster conditions. Very important, property. We are the Department of Agriculture. We're used to working on ag lands. This is probably the only program that we have in our agency that allows us to work on other properties besides ag land, residential land and commercial land and whatnot. So a little bit different even for us, even for our folks, because we're used to being out there in alfalfa fields and pecan orchards and whatnot. We don't do that with this program. With this program, we're now looking at your residential property. So property basically is defined as structures such as houses, buildings, roads, utilities, growing crops, orchards, all of that other great stuff. That's essentially not eligible for this program. So it's a complete 180 for us. We start going in a different direction when it comes to this. What's that?
It says standing timber also. That's not cultivated timber for sale, right? That's just standing timber.
Right. So we're not going to go in and we're not going to restore a hillside just to restore the timber.
Right.
Just, that would be more.
Let me keep the hillside there.
Yes, exactly. You're talking soil erosion, flood control, but not just to grow trees again. So yeah, that's kind of the difference there. And then again, that threat can actually be at the site. It could be upstream of the site or it could be downstream of the site. So when we look at our areas that we're working in, we may not be working on the exact piece of property that's going to be affected. We might be working up the watershed to protect a piece of property that's down below. A bridge on Gavilan is one of the probably biggest concerns that we've seen so far. So that's some of the work that we do up above it will be to protect that bridge down below. Next slide. So a little bit about what we can do. I want to start on a positive note and say what we can do. We will talk about what we can't do. We do have some limitations, but basically what we do is we reduce threats to life and property. We can do soil erosion, as you can see up there. We can remove debris. So a lot of times, we have logs and sticks and whatnot. We can remove the debris. We do have to be aware of pre-existing conditions. Okay, that's kind of where some of our limitations come in. If it was not caused by the natural disaster, we cannot work on it. So if there was a big tree that fell in your yard before the burn came through, we're not going to be able to remove that tree because that was not a cause of the natural disaster. So we have to be careful of pre-existing conditions. We can restore the hydrologic capacity of the natural environment to the maximum extent practical. So if we need to go in and clean out debris from a channel, we have the availability to do that. We're not going to make it bigger, but we can at least restore that capacity back. We do have to ensure that we're economically, socially, and environmentally defensible and technically sound. And that's what our group is basically looking for. We need to be able to defend what we're doing. It has to be technically sound. It's not going to do it just to do it. And then again, we are limited to the measures to the greatest extent possible that use the least damaging practices and techniques, and that restore some of those existing characteristics. And contour tree felling is one of the ones that I can think of right off the bat. The tree is there. It's not, it was part of the landscape. We can use that tree. We can restore that and use that existing characteristic. And I mean, it's obviously burned, but at least it's not an eyesore, and we're trying to restore that. Next slide. So this is an example of some of the work that we did on the U Park fire, some debris removal. So the pictures that you're going to see, the big picture down here and the little picture up there of the trees, that's looking upstream and downstream from a specific site. And what happened here is there's some buildings in the background. I don't know, in this picture right up here, you can kind of see some buildings downstream there. And basically what we're trying to do here is when the forest fire came through here, the firefighters cut down all of these trees, and they just burnt this little river riparian area that was going through there. And all of that down debris was posing a threat to the property down below, the houses that were down below. And so what you can see there is that we came in through our program and we removed all of that debris that's in there. You can see the picture on the top right and the bottom left of some of the work that we did to restore that little area right in there. And so one of the things I do want to point out is that you'll notice on the top picture and the top left, top right, there's still some pieces of trash, debris, junk, whatever you want to call it, in there. And the reason that we didn't remove that is because that was not caused by the storm. That trash pile was in there pre-existing, basically. So again, we have our limits, and we do work around some of the stuff that's already there. You can also see some of the wattles that we installed down here. Some of them got a little displaced, but there are some wattles. These wattles are basically on this side slope right up here on the upper reaches of that watershed. And so that's just kind of an example of some of the work that we have implemented in the past. We also reseeded this hill right here. Next slide. Talk a little bit about flood. I understand that we're probably dealing more so with the fire right now, but when the flood does come, just to show you a little bit of work that we did on the Ute Park and the community of Ute Park. So you can see the aerial photograph on the left where that flood water just came in and deposited all of this debris amongst the houses. And then on the right, you'll see some of the work that NRCS paid to do. We came in and removed all of that debris, the mud, the muck, and whatnot. So you can see on the right, you can see the green roofed homes are the green roofed house and little building right in the middle of the picture there. So kind of gives you an idea of some of the work that we've done in the past. This was with the sponsor was Colfax County, great sponsor to work with. So we really look forward to working with our sponsors for this event.
You guys come back, or is it just a one-time?
So yeah, I'll talk a little bit about operation and maintenance is what we refer to that as. And this was on the upper part of the watershed on the Ute Park flood. You can see that red pickup truck on the top right was sitting right in front of those garage doors that you see on that house. The picture on the bottom, that flatbed trailer was connected to that pickup truck before that flood come through. There was no rock at all in this area. So you can see all of the rock that come down out of this one canyon. Basically, the Ute Park fire burnt the watershed above, causing the Ute Park flood. Kind of went hand in hand. And so you can see on the left-hand side some of the work that we did. We came in, removed all of the rock, obviously got rid of the truck and the trailer. We put some barriers up to protect that house there. And you can see the red roof house on the right picture and then the red roof house on the left picture there. So just, again, just an example of some of the work that we've done in the past through this program. So we'll talk about eligible sites. So basically what we do is the NRCS, we're going to go out and we're going to conduct site assessments. And it's going to be case by case. And that's the important thing to remember, is that what may work on one person's property may not be the same practice that we implement on somebody else's property. I know you hear the coffee shop talk all the time, but well, they did this for me, how come they're not doing it for you? Well, that might not, it might be because it wasn't applicable on your land or whatnot. But we do go out, we do the investigation, and we do make the recommendations to implement the work that's necessary to repair that site. Okay, and that's one of the key things. We're only going to do what's necessary to repair the threat to life and property. The individual assessment that we do actually will determine if your place is eligible for EWP. So again, your neighbor might be eligible and you may not be eligible, or vice versa. It's all case by case, site by site. It's also very important to note that if we cannot reduce or eliminate that threat to life and property, we are not allowed to, we're basically prohibited on providing that assistance. And it's been done in the past with forest fires. We get in areas where there's just real steep, rocky watersheds. We know there's going to be a lot of water come down through there. There's just not a whole lot that we can do about it through our programs. It exceeds our limitations. An example, that U Park flood that you guys saw come through, I had an individual ask me in their community meeting, well, what can we do to stop that canyon from flooding anymore? So basically build a dam the size of Elephant Butte. This is how you're going to stop it, and that's outside of our capacity. So if we can't fix the problem, reduce the threat, then we're prohibited from working on it. And we probably will see cases like that out there, just driving through and seeing some of the watersheds, the steepness, the slopes, the rock, the terrain. In some cases, we just may not be able to do that. So we'll definitely take a look though. Just some planning considerations that we have to do. Again, we have to use construction techniques that avoid as much damage. We want to, we don't want to have those adverse impacts on the environment. So we do try and come in with some techniques and some equipment that are user friendly, I guess. We do conduct our cultural resource surveys. As a matter of fact, we have our archaeologist here today. She's going to be out with us as we're doing our site visits. I'll actually show you one of the slides at the end of my presentation. It's something pretty cool that we found when we did the cultural surveys. Probably the coolest finding I've ever seen in my life. We do our NEPA. Our NEPA is nowhere, sorry, Forest Service, it's nowhere as complicated as the Forest Service. We conduct our NEPA in-house. We'll have our biologists come out and help us do our what we call our CPA 52, which is basically a condensed version of NEPA. We're able to get it done in probably about a day and a half after we do our site visits. So we do have to do the NEPA though. We do have to emphasize on measures that are economically acceptable, and again, cause the least damaging techniques possible, or the least damage to habitat or whatnot. They have to be technically sound. I already talked about that. We're not going to implement something just to do it. We do have to look at the federal laws, the state laws, the tribal laws. So we're looking at all of those rules and regulations. If it needs a 404 permit, that's something that we work with the sponsor to get. So we still have to follow all those rules and regulations. And then we look at all of the alternatives out there. So if it's a structural practice, non-structural, bioengineering, that's where your seeding comes in and some of your contour tree felling comes in. There's also the option for floodplain easements. I don't think floodplain easements is going to be applicable in this area, but we do have the option of purchasing floodplain easements. So just some of the considerations that we look at when we're out there in the field. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we cannot do. Again, we have our limits. We do not work on federal lands, so we are purely private and state lands. So BLM, Forest Service, all that good land is out. If an area has been impacted 2 out of the last 10 years, we got to draw a line somewhere. So 2 out of the last 10 years and it's done. Again, this fire, this area, this is the first time it's been impacted, so it definitely does not fall into that category. The disposal of animal carcasses, there was only one exception where we can dispose of animal carcasses. I haven't heard of any animals dying, but if there was, we may or may not be able to dispose of that animal carcass. And then we cannot perform operation and maintenance such as periodic or routine work necessary to maintain an existing practice. And with that one, the one I like to give is, or my perfect example is removing sediment or debris from a reservoir or debris basin that was there. That sediment and debris was there prior to that event coming down. So if there's a pond, an erosion control pond, and it's full of sediment right now, probably was not because of the fire. We haven't had any rain, so we know that it was pre-existing. We're not going to go clean that out because that would be considered an operation and maintenance. Now, after a rain comes down and we've been working on a flood and it got deposited, all that debris and whatnot got deposited, and that could be something that we could actually remove. So it just depends on the circumstances. Next slide. Again, we're not going to solve the watershed or natural problems that existed prior to the disaster. So if we go out there and we find gully erosion happening, we're not going to come in with measures through this program to address that gully erosion because that was their pre-disaster. We're prohibited from working on roads. We're not going to repair a road. We're not going to rebuild it. That includes public, private. So I know a lot of folks have been telling us, well, I only have a 12-inch culvert, gutter. I was going to call it gutter. I know if you're Spanish. If you have that culvert, we're not going to go in and tear that culvert out and put a bigger culvert in for you. We do not work on roads. We can protect roads, but we will not work or rebuild the road. Increase the pre-disaster capacity of a channel. So again, if the channel gets filled in with sediment or debris, we can go clean it out, but we're not going to increase that. We're not going to make it bigger. So if there's a pond or whatnot, we're not going to increase the size of that. We're not going to do anything for aesthetics or landscaping. So if your favorite apple tree got burned, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to come in and replace that. And then again, we don't work on wells. We don't drill wells, modify wells. We're not going to construct pipelines, irrigation pipeline, and we're not going to purchase any portable equipment. So again, some limitations that I'd like to let the group be aware of.
You might be able to protect the well, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we can protect it. We've done it in the past where we've protected wells, utilities, well houses and whatnot, but we're not going to come in and we're not going to do like water testing and all that good stuff. We're just here to protect the structure. Next slide. Our sister agency, the Farm Service Agency, has a program they call the Emergency Conservation Program, or ECP, again, another acronym, right? We're not the government if we don't have that. So if there's a situation that's eligible for ECP, we cannot work on it through our program. And basically what ECP does is that's where the ag lands come into play after natural disasters. So if somebody had an alfalfa field, that got covered in sediment or it got burned or something, the Farm Service Agency would be the entity to implement their program, and it would not be eligible for our program. And then again, we're not going to do management practices such as conservation tillage or similar practices. I know that some folks maybe want to graze their property. We're not going to come back and work on prescribed grazing or loss of grass or something like that. So any kind of management practice, again, we won't. All right, let's talk a little bit about the sponsor, the funding. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this because I want to reach out to the stakeholders more so than the sponsors. We've had a lot of communication with the sponsors. Like I said, the Village of Ruidoso, Lincoln County, they both stepped up and requested to be a sponsor. And it's kind of ironic maybe, but we're actually in other areas, we're partnering with the village and the county for EWP. So this is our kind of our second go around with these sponsors. And again, we look forward to working with them again. But the sponsors do have a lot of responsibility. And so they're a big part of this. So next time you see somebody from one of those entities, definitely thank them for being a sponsor. They have to have a legal interest or responsibility in the area. So where the Village of Ruidoso's limits end, that's where their sponsorship ends. We cannot go into an area that they have no interest in. Same thing with Lincoln County, and that's why we needed both the county and the village to really step up so that way we can fill in the gaps between the federal land and get all of the entities or all the land in between. They have to be capable of obtaining the necessary land rights. So if we're going to implement work on anybody's property, we have to have your permission first. And so the sponsor would reach out to you and say, okay, we want to first make sure that you own the place. So they probably want to see a deed or something. And then they'll probably be getting some kind of permission from you that says, yes, you can implement these measures on my land. So landowners, you guys are involved in this as well. We're not going to go in and do something without your permission. We've done it in the past where folks say, no, I don't want that done. Okay, thank you very much.
So
We're
What if you can't get a hold of somebody? In other words, if the person owning the property above you can't be reached, then you can't do anything on that?
Exactly. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but we won't do anything without that landowner's permission. We need that permission. So it's important that, so if you know your neighbors, please talk to them. Yes, sir, question.
Will the county come through your agency and do that assessment and knock on your door and ask you for permission to do this, or do we need to be the forward leading edge to get signed up and have them come look for the benefit of the whole watershed?
Yeah, good question. Great question, actually. And I was going to cover this at the end, but since you asked the question. So what we do is it's kind of a combination of both. We've got in the back, and we had these at the community meeting last Thursday, what we call just requests for assistance forms. And we ask that landowners come and step up and say, hey, come look at my place. And that's all you're doing by requesting that assistance, is just letting us know that you were affected by the fire and you'd like for us to do an assessment on your place. Doesn't mean that you're going to get the assistance or that your place is eligible, but it's at least telling us as the entity, as the agency, saying, come out and take a look.
You will get an assessment.
Yeah, and we'll be out there. If you turn one in, we'll be out there. We get phone number, property, the address, ask for some basic, what happened, give us a description, and then we can be out there. We have our team on site this week. If we need to come back next week, we'll come back next week. And so we won't leave until we've assessed everybody that has requested that assistance. But on the flip side to that, if the sponsor needs to go start knocking on the doors, I'm sure they'll do that too. So it's a combination of
Those doors are pretty far away.
Yeah. Like I said in the last meeting, don't run us off if you see us on your place. So we're trying to help. So the next responsibility that the sponsor has is performing the operation and maintenance responsibility. So you talk about coming back and making sure that some of those practices get installed. That falls under the operation and maintenance. And before we leave, we'll have an operation and maintenance plan for all of the practices that we implement. The sponsor will be fully aware of what needs to happen. They're going to need the landowner's assistance on that. After a rainstorm comes in, if we go and we put wattles out there and a big rain comes in and some of those wattles get busted up, it'd be a good idea to call up the village or the Lincoln County and say, hey, some of these wattles got destroyed during this rainstorm or whatnot. A lot of elk, a lot of deer in the area. Those guys, turkey love wattles. I don't know why, but they'll tear it up. So they need your help. But the sponsor does have those responsibilities, and we ask that you do work with the sponsor when the time comes. The other thing that is part of operation and maintenance is practices have lifespans. Some of the structural practices that we implement may have a 15 or 20-year lifespan. Some of the other practices may only have a 5-year lifespan. If we do contour tree filing, those trees are going to eventually rot. So we don't expect for the sponsor to be coming back, every 20 years and dropping more logs, once they kind of rot away. And hopefully by that time, some of the grass will have come up and that site will have been rehabbed. So there's going to be different time limits. It kind of goes back to some of the questions you were asking to the Bear team. It just really depends on the practice that is being implemented. The sponsor will also be administer the contracting. So they'll be responsible for finding contractors, putting out requests for proposals, hiring contractors. We assist with that. The NRCS, our agency, we assist with that. We can do site showings to contractors. We'll do the designs, the survey, the design. If a contractor, they want a site showing to show all the contractors that are going to submit bids, we'll be out there. We can explain to them everything that's going on. But we, as the federal agency, we do not select the contractor. That would be up to the sponsor. And then the last part of it, and probably the biggest part, is, of course, the responsibility for matching funds. So basically, the match is a 75-25% match between the federal government, the NRCS, and the sponsor. So the federal government would pick up 75% of the cost, the sponsor would pick up 25%, and it would be at no cost to the landowner. I will tell you, there are instances based on availability of funds. Sometimes the state can pitch in. I've been on several meetings where the state is looking at ways to help sponsors with that match. So hopefully they can come in. The soil and water conservation districts are also talking about helping out with that. So, there's a lot of partners that are involved in the match. So we're trying to make the money go as far as we can, so that way we can help as many producers as we can. Go back one more, sorry. So just a few notes on the top right, you'll see that we have to sign a cooperative agreement before any work can begin. So I know that we've started having conversations about purchasing seed and whatnot. So if that is something that you guys are going to want paid through our program, don't purchase that seed just yet. Let us do the assessment, let us request the funding, because we may be able to pay for it for you, and then you don't have to pay for it yourself. So we need to do that. And then any funds funds may not be used to reimburse project sponsors for work performed before we enter into an agreement. So that kind of goes back into not only purchasing the equipment, but doing any kind of work. I know some folks have done work on the place. That's great. I love to see that when folks come in and want to do their own work on their own property. But we do have our program that hopefully we can pay for some work that can be done. Next slide. So let's talk about our process and what our process looks like. And this is prior to funding. So the first thing is that funding from our end that we've talked about, the 75% that the federal government is responsible for this program, it's on a first come, first served basis. And we basically compete with every other state in the United States for this funding that's coming in. And it's really not a competition, it's first come, first served. We have to request those funds from our national headquarters. We don't have them readily available. They are federal dollars, so they have to get appropriated. And basically, in order to get to the step for us to request the funds, we have to follow the 5 steps that you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen there. Steps 1, 2, and 3 have already been completed. Okay, we've already done a rapid survey to determine that EWP is practical. We already submitted our electronic disaster report that basically tells our national headquarters that, hey, a request for funding is going to come. We already have the sponsors' letters requesting the assistance. So we are basically going to do step number 4 this week, and hopefully we'll get it done this week. That's kind of our goal. And that's for us to go out and do those assessments and determine the eligible sites. We put together what we call a damage survey report. It's really not a report. It's more of an assessment that we send up to headquarters, more of a request. So it's not going to be the report like the BEAR report that has all these nice maps and all this data and whatnot. It's just going to be mostly the stuff that we put together when it comes to the eligible sites and the practices that we can do. Has cost estimates in it as well. So once we get that done, hopefully by the end of the week, we'll have gotten through step number 5 to where we actually make that request for funding to our national headquarters. Again, when we work with the village and when we work with Lincoln County, they're going to have to go back and probably digest some of the recommendations that we're making. They got to make sure that they have their funding, their 25% for it. So we give it to the sponsor. They're fully informed and fully aware of what's going on. The good thing, bright spot, I guess, if you would, not very many bright spots when it comes to natural disasters, but in this case right now, there's funding available at our national headquarters. They've informed us that they do have funds available. Usually when there's no funds available, we go on a wait list, and you could be on a wait list for a year or so. Right now, there's funds available. So I guess that's one of the good things about this disaster happening so early in the year, is that not all the other states have gotten their hands in that cookie jar. We're the only ones right now that seems like we're kind of dipping into that, which is it's sad, but at least there's funding available. Okay, so that's prior to getting funded. Let's say that we go through those 5 steps and we do get the funding. So then we have to follow the next 5 steps after we receive the funding. The first thing that we would do is we would write a project agreement with the sponsor, and that will outline all of the responsibilities the sponsor has. That's including the match, the 25% match that they have, operation and maintenance. It'll all line it out. That's something that we do, not the private landowners. Then we can start doing survey and design. That will have our engineers out there, our forest folks, our soil cons out there doing some survey and design. Once we get all those, the work can begin. We can do some construction inspections when the projects are completed. We go out and we do basically a checkout. If it meets our standards and specifications, it's following our design, then we go ahead and move forward with the payment process, and really the sponsor pays the contractor, and then they work with us to get the payment. So funds are not exchanged between landowners to pay contractors. Everything basically is, we go out there, we do the designs, bring in the sponsor, finds a crew to come in, they do the work, we pay for it, and the landowner is hopefully happy by the time we leave, and their knees aren't hurting and their back's not hurting because they didn't have to do the work. So that's kind of the next step after we get the funding in state. Next slide. So just to sum it up real quick, we've already done the first one, the ESDs, the DSRs. We got to complete those. That's the next work. Prior to any work, we have to have that agreement. The sponsor will obtain all of the land rights. That's when they'll be reaching out and getting everybody's permission. We'll complete the survey, the design. The sponsor will pick the contractors. The projects commence. We go through the work. We do the final checkout. The sponsor requests the payment from NRCS. And we basically have 220 days from the date that we receive funding in the state to complete the work. So there are some timelines. We try and push it out with enough time. Believe me, 220 days comes fast when you're on the clock. So, but you know, we know the monsoons are coming. We're trying to get our part of it done so that way we can get contractors out there before the heavy rains hit. And really, it's good to have some seed on the ground when those rains come. So that's just to sum it up a little bit of where we are. I have a couple of other examples of some of the work that we've done so you guys can be aware of what we're capable of doing. So on the Doghead Fire in 2016, this is some contour tree felling that we did. You can see the picture on the left-hand side, what it looked like before. We came in, we did the contour tree felling, we reseeded it, and you can really see on the bottom right, the grass on the uphill side of the log really came in there. We staked those logs in. We have a series of them staggered up the hill, and we just got a really good response off of that contour tree felling. A lot cheaper than bringing in wattles, especially in the areas that we were working in. We, on the U Park fire, you can see on the bottom right, there's that cabin that came down. This is on the Philmont Boy Scout Ranch. And the big picture on the left basically shows the watershed above it. So I took this picture. This picture right here was basically taken from the corner of that cabin right there. And so what we did is we came in and we built a diversion because we knew that this watershed was going to flow. We've already seen some of the debris flows. You can see our intern there, and you can see some of the debris or some of the ash, and that was on a small rain, really small rain, and it brought in all of that debris. Next slide. And so basically, after the first rain, this was a small rain, about a ½ inch, maybe less than a ½ inch rain. All of that debris ended up in that diversion that we did there. So you can see all of that junk would have probably ended up on top of that cabin. There was another cabin up to the left of it. You can see it in the picture on the right. And so basically what we did was we designed that diversion to flow in between the two cabins and run down, and it kept all of that sediment off of the cabin there and probably saved that cabin. It's still functioning to this day. So the Boy Scouts are able to enjoy that place up there. Next slide. This is an area that we masticated and we reseeded. And so what we've tried to do in the past through NRCS is try to be real specific on where we seed and how we seed. You've heard in the past where they fly seed over, and we've seen in a lot of places, especially on the Trigo Fire, Big Springs Fire up around the Estancia Mountain Air, they did this seeding and they seeded the side slopes and the seed. The next summer that we went out there, we found all the grass in the bottom of the gully. And so we said, well, if we're going to be doing that, let's not drop any seed on the real steep stuff. Let's be real specific, site specific on where we're going to seed. So what we did here was we had the contractor come in and hand broadcast seed, and then they came in with a masticator, and that masticator incorporated the seed in the ground as they were maneuvering, and they were masticating all of the burnt trees, and the burnt trees served as a mulch. And so we didn't have to pay for mulch because we used the material that was already on site. Mastication it worked really good. They have to go over it a lot to make sure that they really break down those logs. You're going to have bigger stuff there, it's just inevitable. But we got a good response. We actually did this 2 weeks before a nice steady rain come through. That rain came through 2 weeks later, just at a nice steady pace. And we actually have annuals. I think we did either oats or wheat. I don't remember. I think it was oats in this one. We had them up to my knee by 2 weeks later. So it was pretty cool to see that response, and we were real specific. Masticators have their limits. They're not going to work on steep slopes. They're not going to work on. Is that yours? My team? No. I guess it's better than somebody riding on the board. I'm sorry, I didn't. So,
Gary.
so yeah, the masticators had their limits, and whatever the limit was of the masticator was the limit of where we were gonna seed. If it was too steep and too rocky, we didn't want to throw seed there. We wanted to throw it in deeper soils for them in areas that the masticator could actually get through. So real site specific, and we got a real good response. At least we feel we did. So I told you that I was going to tell you one of the things that we found. Our archaeologists actually found this revolver when they were doing one of our surveys on the Philmont Scout Ranch. This was the coolest thing I'd ever found. So on the top right, you'll see I'm holding it. You can see that guy was loaded. You can still see the bullets in the revolver there. So it was pretty cool. I like to show that to everybody because our agency kind of had a hand in that one of finding some pretty cool artifacts. So a lot of times when you say, you don't have to do cultural surveys, it's pretty cool to do them still. So. I just like to throw that out.
It's in the museum at Philmont too.
Actually, you're right. Yeah. So this one here, there was kind of a video that I was playing, but on the right, on the left-hand side is the museum that Philmont did. They got it cleaned out. They had some guy come in and look at it and age it, and then they actually put it in their museum. So it's pretty cool. Our staff was one of the few that actually got to hold it and check it out. So, yeah. All right. Any questions?
So you guys are gonna be doing site inspections this week?
Yes, sir. So we do have request for assistance forms in the back. Aaron over there, raise your hand. Aaron. Do Cubs fan. If you're a Cubs fan, or if you're not a Cubs fan, don't hold it against him. But he does have those requests. If you know anybody that's not at these meetings, please send them our way. Come contact Eric. I believe Ira posted the request for assistance on the county website. So folks can go to the county website. They can turn it into Eric, they can turn it into Ira, and they'll make sure that they get it over to
I
us.
think that's where we're gonna have an issue here in the villages. We have a lot of out-of-town landowners that have to be contacted in order to be able to do the work. I mean, really, when you think about it, it's not your property. You need to think about it. It's the guy above you.
Right. Yeah, it's going to take a group effort, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to live stream this event, is for some of the out-of-towners and folks that didn't have internet or whatnot to come in and join us here today. So we know that we talked about it. Eric and his staff have already talked about looking on the assessor's website and trying to get some folks that live out of town so we can get a whole group effort. But yeah, we do need folks to step up, let us know, let your neighbors know. You know, we're going to be around all this week. Our team is actually sitting right here in the front, not in the front. I wish they were in the front. They wanted to sit in the back.
We couldn't see.
Yeah. So just so you know, we have Adrian Tafoya with us here. He's our South Area Conservationist. He's going to be on one of the teams. Josh Archuleta comes to us from Estancia. He's a soil con. Dean Pritchett is an engineer out of Las Cruces. Patrick Fox is an engineering technician out of Roswell. Molly Murphy's our archaeologist. She did not find a gun, by the way.
I do not.
You wish you were. You would have been in that museum. And then Aaron in the back is also on my staff as a program manager. So that's kind of our team. We're going to have two separate teams. We're going to work the Nogal Canyon and the McBride this week. So we're going to try and hit both places.
So if somebody is out of town, do you have to wait for that form to be signed and sent back, or is there a digital way of doing that? Or
yeah, if they want an electronic version, we can email them one. And then if they can just sign it, and even if they'll send me a picture of it, sign it, send me a picture of it, so at least I have some kind of consent to be out there on the property. Yeah, we don't want to be on somebody's place that we're not welcome, I guess. Yes, sir.
So in the event that your upstream neighbor is either interested or you don't get a hold of them, will they bump downstream and maybe take care of some of your stuff? Or, because somebody's gonna have to assess the whole canyon. Right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a federal government or the private property side of the creek. I'm just kind of wondering, because I got neighbors that just aren't interested in even defending their properties up there, and you're not gonna get a hold of those people. But
Yeah.
if you skip me, because the best practice is to be on them, you don't get a hold of them, we bump back down to me and.
Yeah, we'll definitely assess your property. We're not going to leave you out. We're not just going to say, well, your neighbors don't want to do it, so we can't do it. If we can reseed on your place, we prefer to reseed the entire watershed and get everybody on board, because it's just only going to create a better environment. But if we have producers that don't want to do it, There are times where if a landowner does not want to participate, it could kill the entire project, right? A diversion, you saw the diversion around that house there. We had an instance where we were doing a diversion that was gonna be about 3 or 4 houses. One of the guys in the middle didn't want to do anything. Well, with that gap in the middle, the diversion wouldn't have served much of a purpose, so we couldn't do it. So I would like to get as many people as we can on board, but we won't skip you. We'll go ahead and skip this.
Back, I think that's how you guys going down to those rivers one day. You doing assessments up there or something other project? I recognize a couple of guys. Same group.
Thanks,
So, Ashley, you have the questions from the chat?
You know, that big business there in Homestead, it's probably half in the city, half in the county. And then the forest borders it on the east side, so, you know, it's all gonna be coming down into the same creek, so everybody needs to get it together before.
So we had one question, and this was for the bear presentation. Is it possible to receive these slides through an email? They're just debating on whether or not to purchase flood insurance, and so we kind of wanted to rotate your slides again.
It should be on. Oh, myself? No, I don't have it on.
Yeah, I can make that available, yes.
So can you just post all the slides on our website and push everything to that?
Yeah, so we can, I'll get Kenneth's and I'll get Jen's presentation and we'll get it posted. If that's okay with you, Kenneth. Yeah. So we'll get those posted on our website and then we'll send that out to the cooperators group. And then hopefully this by Wednesday, everyone can get these sent to everyone.
Eric, on your website is?
What our website is? It's www.rudoso.nm.gov. So unfortunately, it's not the first thing that comes up if you search for Rudoso on Google, but it's up there.
And then we had 2 comments, one from the New Mexico Forestry Division. They just wanted to let people know that people can get flood insurance because of the fire. It will go into effect right away without the 30-day waiting period. So they do want to recommend getting the flood insurance. And then we had a representative from the Forest Service. They wanted to bring up the National Weather Service will be providing spot weather forecasts once the monsoons have started for the McBride bird scar. And this will be available to anybody who would like to access it.
Great, thank you, Ashley. So with that, if anyone has any further questions for the speakers, I'm sure they'll wait here for 10-15 minutes. So please come up and talk to them. Aaron in the back, wave your arms. He's got the sign-up sheets for the EWP, so make sure you stop, and I'm sure he's got enough if you could grab some for your neighbors and really push your neighbors and adjacent properties to sign up. And then Ashley also has some sheets back there that has some other contact information about other services.